So I'm going to start off this video with a really unfortunate confession. I have never actually read anything by Brandon Sanderson. I know, I'm really sorry, it's a tragedy indeed. I'm really sorry. But one day when I was hanging out with my fiance, I spied her collection of Brandon Sanderson books on the shelf. I then asked her a question that had been in the back of my mind ever since I started more purposefully studying the art and mechanics of storytelling. I turned to my fiance and said, so everything that I've heard about Brandon Sanderson's writing all uber hypes up his world building and the crazy magic systems he comes up with. I have always been curious, how does he do on writing theme? Now I ask this because I have never once heard literally anyone talk about the themes of Mistborn or the Stormlight Archives or even Way of Kings, but everyone has been super hyped to tell me about the awesome world building Brando Sando does. Well, my fiance then kind of went off on me a little bit. She gave me this whole spiel about how yes, the world building is immaculate and endlessly creative and interesting. However, Brando Sando's world building is a lot like the lightsabers from Star Wars. Super cool things to get you really interested in the world and the story, but the reason why you love Star Wars is because of the characters and the beautiful and incredible themes behind it. Kind of a relevant lesson for Disney right about now. Brandon Sanderson has his own really cool things to get you engaged in his worlds. The shard blades, people eating metal to do really cool magic stuff, but his stories actually mean something because of the characters and the personal and human themes behind what he writes. If it was just cool world building and no theme, Brandon Sanderson would not be the legendary storyteller he is known as today. Brandon Sanderson's stories would not be remembered. So that leads us into today's topic, which my fiance already so eloquently exemplified. What makes certain stories last? It is a question that has a lot of relevance today in the larger storytelling world with Disney's recent catastrophic failure at the Oscars for almost 4 years in a row, but also to you, the viewer. If you are a storyteller of any kind, or even like a salesman or an entrepreneur, I'm going to teach you a principle today that, if done right, will almost guarantee you to make your stories memorable and to make the things that you say and the ideas that you pitch actually last. I am, of course, talking about a bait and switch. Basically what I'm proposing to you, if you want your stories to last and to be remembered, you kind of have to utilize what I believe to be one of the most scummy and underhanded sales tactics ever. But when George Lucas did it, or Pixar or Disney or Steven Spielberg or Miyazaki or Brad Bird or even Christopher Nolan, it was fine because everyone liked it anyways. Pretty much every storyteller, whether they realize it or not, has in some way bait and switched their audience. In order to understand how they did it, we're going to have to talk about the difference between the story on the ground and the story in the sky. Because my fiance mentioned Star Wars, let's use that as our primary example. The story on the ground is the finite parts of your story, the plots, the world, and the interesting set pieces. What actually happens in your story? What are the mechanical pieces that make it interesting? For Star Wars, of course, you have a world chock full of lightsabers and spaceships and the Force and space wizards and pirates and droids and aliens and, of course, the Death Star. A spaceship so powerful that it can destroy an entire planet. Utilizing all of these cool world building set pieces, we can tell a pretty awesome rebellion story. There is a huge space war going on and the bad guys have what is equivalent of a space nuke ready to wreck the Holy Rebellion. Through a great deal of effort, the secret plans to said space nuke fall into the hands of a young boy named Luke, who meets up with the old wizard hermit Ben Kenobi. Luke's aunt and uncle get torched and now he's off on an adventure, making allies, fighting the bad guys, and through some wizarding training ends up destroying the Death Star once and for all. Boom. That is the story on the ground. This is basically what you would tell someone if you wanted to pitch your favorite film for movie night. Take something like Ratatouille. Rat Remy wants to cook, but he can't because he's a rat, so he accidentally makes his entire family homeless and then meets up with Linguini, who sucks at cooking. However, Remy and Linguini learn that Linguini's nerve endings are all skittywampus and he can be puppeteered by Remy pulling on his hair. The two join forces, wacky hijinks ensue, and then they come up against the critic Anton Ego, cook a fire Ratatouille, bada bing bada boom, best Pixar movie ever. You could probably go on for a while thinking about 100 different examples of good stories on the ground. It is essentially what you would tell someone to get them excited to experience your story. The cool world, fun plot details, wacky characters, expansive quests, oftentimes in the right medium, cool music, and amazing visuals. Think of the story on the ground almost as what you would tell a 14-year-old to get them hyped for the next Fast and Furious movie. What is the spectacle? What is the crazy, cool, new, interesting thing that happens in that story? What is the story's concept? Gods of death that give humans a killer notebook, a superhero family, a time-traveling robot of death, an ogre falling in love with a princess, a human trapped in a monster world that can either kill them all or make friends with everyone, a repeating 3-day cycle that ends in an apocalyptic catastrophe, an evil ring that must be destroyed, dinosaurs breaking out of a zoo, a rat that can cook! Essentially, if you want your story to be remembered, it has to have a unique and interesting concept or idea. The world or plot has to pull people from disinterested to curious. How are you going to engage the interest of your audience? What unique thing do you have to offer them? Why should they engage with your story or world? But here's the secret. While yes, you will give them that interesting plot and world, your focus as the storyteller is actually going to be on something else entirely. You are going to make a last-minute switch on your narrative that will make your story memorable, personal, and powerful. While the story on the ground is exciting and interesting, and you will dive into that as a storyteller, you are actually going to give your audience the story in the sky. If the story on the ground is the mechanical skeleton of storytelling, then the story in the sky is its artistic soul. The story in the sky focuses on the human, personal side of the story, the themes, the characters, the lessons, and the emotional impact of your story. If we go by our previous Star Wars example, our story in the sky is Luke, who goes from a young boy dreaming about having an adventure to discovering and tapping into a powerful magic that will change the rest of his life and overcome the greatest evil in the galaxy. Luke Skywalker is thrown into a grand conflict between light and darkness and must learn how to become a true Jedi, not only to save the galaxy, but to save his own father who had fallen from grace. Luke's journey is focused on the question, can pure good overcome pure evil, even if that evil had already fallen to darkness? Can evil be redeemed, and if so, what power does it take to redeem the fallen? There is an endless catalog of themes that are featured in different stories in the sky. Everything from greatness can come from anywhere to can having a family be more exciting and fulfilling than one's former glory days, to when grief and death feel unstoppable, how do we overcome it, to when does science and curiosity go too far, to can someone who has been ridiculed and outcasted from society still open up and fall in love. The story in the sky is the soul and heart of your story. It takes everything set up by the story on the ground and gives it intense and powerful meaning. Batarangs and a criminal that dresses like a clown would mean nothing without the conflict between justice and natural goodness and chaos and natural evil. Elves and dwarves mean nothing without seeing the darkest night and still fighting on to the beautiful morning. Lightsabers would be nothing without the battle between light and darkness and the redemption of evil. The greatest trick in storytelling is to give your audience both, but to pitch the story on the ground. Get the audience interested in the fascinating, in the new, in the imaginative, and in the creative. Then, when you have captured their attention with the allure of your fascinating mind, hand them your heart. Give your audience your very soul so that they understand what your story and your characters mean to you. It takes a lot of work and a lot of practice to do this in a way that really connects with people, and I will admit there are some fascinating outliers from the rules I just gave you. Comedy movies like Dumb and Dumber are particularly in that category, but when done right, you will have created something very, very special. I want you to take a moment and think about your favorite stories. Picture your favorite movies, the video games you love, and the books that you adore. How did you become interested in them in the first place? Why do you come back to them again and again and again? I would be willing to bet that the story on the ground garnered your attention, but the story in the sky left you wanting more. And that is the greatest magic trick in all of storytelling. Thank you all for watching. If you really enjoyed what you saw, please subscribe for more. I am going to be getting back into making videos and I'm really, really, really excited for it. Also, huge announcement. Please don't miss this. I am currently working on probably the biggest project I have ever worked on ever so far in my life. I'm making a card game and I have another YouTube channel called Chapter 1 Games that I'll link in the description below that already has several videos detailing kind of the concept and the characters and what this game is all about. So please, please, please go and check that out. Have a fantastic rest of your day and subscribe and like the video. Yeah!